Stop. Before you swipe away, you need to hear this, because what I am about to walk you through is not another recycled rumor, not another Reddit thread reheated by some clickbait farm, not another 2-minute summary stitched together from 3 TMZ headlines. This is the one thread nobody on YouTube has actually pulled, and the second you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. There is a single 20-minute window inside the prosecution's own brief against David Anthony Burke that does not add up, and it quietly rewrites everything we thought we knew about the night 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez died. 20 minutes. That is the entire space between her stepping out of an Uber and a text message that prosecutors swear was a fake alibi. 20 minutes for a teenager to walk into a house alive, get murdered with 2 stab wounds to the torso, be staged into a cover-up, and for the killer to be calm enough to type a flirty "where are you?" Read that sentence again, slowly. Because once you understand what fits inside those 20 minutes, and what absolutely does not, the entire official timeline starts cracking like a windshield, and the theories everyone has been arguing about for months. Was she pregnant? Was her body frozen? Was somebody else in that garage with him? Was the family paid off? They stop being random gossip and start lining up like dominoes pointing at one uncomfortable, never said out loud possibility. I have read every page of the pretrial filing. I have cross-checked it against the medical examiner's report, the surveillance trail, the Santa Barbara breadcrumb route, and 3 different theories the LAPD has had to publicly knock down. I have sat with the photographs prosecutors say exist but will not release, the ones tagged in the file as child sexual abuse material, and I have read the texts she sent in the last weeks of her life. And I am telling you right now, the version the district attorney is selling on television is not the version the evidence is whispering back. So sit down, lock your phone face up, pour the coffee, close the other tabs. We are going inside the file, we are going through every single rumor one by one, and at the end I am going to show you the one detail buried on page after page of this brief that nobody has connected yet, the detail that, if it is true, means this case is even darker than the headlines have admitted. Let us go. You have heard it everywhere. Tweets, TikToks, true crime podcasts with shaky microphones, every comment section under every clip. Was Celeste pregnant when she died? And honestly, when the death certificate was suddenly amended from not pregnant to unknown, I get why the internet lost its mind. Because that kind of revision in a homicide of a 14-year-old girl is the sort of paperwork blink that makes you sit up straight. The certificate is a public document. The amendment was filed in the same week the brief was unsealed. The timing was almost theatrical. And the second that word unknown replaced the word no, every armchair detective with a ring light and a microphone decided this was the smoking gun. The proof that the medical examiner was hiding something. The proof that the DA had not told us the whole story. But here is what almost nobody is telling you. The amendment did not come with new biology. It came with new context. The medical examiner's actual findings, the ones that finally got unsealed, are blunt and clinical and almost cold in their precision. Uterus present, not enlarged, no endometrial lesions, no hemorrhage. Ovaries and fallopian tubes appropriate for age. No lesions in the reproductive tract. Severe postmortem changes. Read between those lines, and what the coroner is really saying is this. Her body had decomposed and been dismembered to such a degree that pregnancy of an early stage simply could not be confirmed or ruled out anatomically anymore. So the only honest entry left on a government form is the word unknown. That is not a smoking gun. That is a scientist refusing to lie on a death certificate. And here is the part that should genuinely settle this for anyone still on the fence. If prosecutors had even a flicker of evidence that this child was pregnant by the defendant, that information would be living on page 1 of the indictment in bold print, because it is legally the strongest motive accelerant they could possibly load into this case. Special circumstances murder. Silencing a witness. Killing for financial gain to protect a career. A pregnant 14-year-old does not weaken any of those theories. It nukes them into orbit. Think about it as a prosecutor. You are walking into a Los Angeles courtroom in front of a jury that already hates your defendant for being 20 years old, famous, rich, and accused of doing unspeakable things to a child. If you can tell that jury that the child was also pregnant with his baby, you do not just win, you obliterate. So when the DA stands at that podium and does not say the word pregnancy, that silence is louder than any rumor. The press conference would have said it. The indictment would have said it. The brief, all 100+ pages of it, would have said it. They did not say it. The truth is messier and quieter. There are texts about sex, texts about Plan B, texts about pregnancy as a topic of conversation between an adult man and a minor he had been grooming for years. Those texts prove the relationship was sexual and predatory and ongoing. They do not, on their own, prove she was carrying a child the night she was killed. The internet wanted a horror movie. The file is giving us something more ordinary and somehow, even more sickening. a 14-year-old who at some point had to text the words Plan B to a grown man, because that was the dynamic he had built. Move on. The pregnancy theory is a dead end. But every dead end in this case eliminates a distraction and gets us closer to the door nobody wants to open. Okay, slow down. Take a breath, because the next theory is real, it is confirmed, and it is the kind of detail that you will think about tonight when you are trying to fall asleep. The tattoo. TMZ broke it months ago, back in September of last year. The whisper that David Burke had a small inked letter on a finger that allegedly mirrored a marking on Celeste's hand. At the time it sounded like tabloid noise. The kind of detail tabloids invent to keep a story alive between real updates. Today, in the actual prosecution brief, it is one of the load-bearing walls of the case. The medical examiner notes a tattoo reading SH on the inside of her right index finger, and partly through that ink, partly through dental records, investigators identified the unrecognizable remains in that Tesla as a missing 14-year-old from Lake Elsinore. Both of them intimate. A tooth chart. A two-letter tattoo. That is what was left to ID her with. Now here is where the story turns into something that genuinely belongs in a horror anthology. Prosecutors allege the defendant amputated her left ring finger and her pinky. Removed them. Cleanly enough that the medical examiner could not locate them at the scene. And the prosecutors give us a reason that makes the room go quiet, because her ring finger carried a tattoo of his name. Read that twice. He could not let her be found wearing him. So he took the evidence off her body, fingers and all, and those fingers, to this day, have never been recovered. Not at the house. Not in the Tesla. Not in any of the garbage bags. Not along the road in Santa Barbara County, where her passport card eventually surfaced. Just gone. Think about what that means about a person. Think about how calculated that is. This is not someone panicking in a hallway. This is someone sitting with a body, doing math about which body parts identify him. And then think about this. If those fingers were souvenirs, kept somewhere, that detail alone is a different category of crime than crime of passion. If they were discarded, the question becomes where, and the answer might be the same long road in Santa Barbara County where her passport card eventually surfaced. The brief is careful not to label him with the word that ends in killer, but the choreography it is describing, the cool removal of identifying marks, is the choreography of someone who has thought about being caught and has thought about it more than once. And here is the question I want every viewer to sit with for a second, because it is the question the defense attorneys are going to fight to keep out of the courtroom. If a person can take a saw to a child's fingers because those fingers are inconvenient evidence, what else has that person done that we do not yet have a body for? The fingers are not just missing. They are a window into a mind. Hold on to that thought. We're going to bring it back when the timeline cracks open later. You have seen the headlines. You have probably seen the speculation on 3 different platforms. The body was frozen. The body had to be frozen. How else does a body sit for months and still be identifiable? Some accounts have even gone further and claimed there was visible ice crystal damage, that there was a chest freezer in the garage, that neighbors had seen him carrying a heavy appliance into the house. Let me be very direct with you. None of that is in the file. The LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division put out an unusual statement specifically to knock this rumor down, saying plainly that Celeste's remains were not frozen when discovered on September the 8th. That is on the record. That is official. And the medical examiner's findings, now unsealed, do not mention freezing, do not mention thawing, do not mention the kind of ice crystal damage to tissue that a forensic pathologist would flag immediately if a body had been put on ice. The pathologist did flag 2 stab wounds, severe decomposition consistent with months of summer heat, dismemberment consistent with a chainsaw, and small blue plastic fragments embedded in what was left of her. That is what is in the report. That is what is not. What the brief describes instead is far more disturbing in its banality. A blue inflatable pool. The kind you buy for children in a backyard in summer. The kind that costs maybe $20 on Amazon. Bought in May. Used, prosecutors allege, as a kind of horrifying tarp so that blood would not pour onto the concrete of his garage. A chainsaw. Possibly more than one tool. The careful collection of small blue plastic fragments embedded in the remains, fragments that the LAPD trace analysis unit matched physically, like a torn puzzle piece, back to the very pool he had purchased months earlier. A cadaver bag. Heavy-duty laundry bags. A burn cage from Amazon, ordered under the name Victoria Mendez, sitting on a porch in Hollywood Hills like a normal package on a normal afternoon. Think about that delivery for a second. A delivery driver, in shorts in the California sun, dropping a burn cage on a marble step, snapping a photo for the app, driving off to the next stop. He did not need a freezer. According to the prosecution, he had a Tesla, a closed trunk, a quiet street around the corner from his house, and weeks of summer heat and time. He left her there. He went on tour. He performed. He smiled into cameras. He gave radio interviews. He posed for promotional shots. He celebrated an album release. And somewhere, sealed inside that vehicle, the worst evidence in Los Angeles County was decomposing in plain sight. While neighbors complained of a smell, he kept blaming on plumbing, on a backed-up bathroom, on anything except the truth. The freezer theory dies here. But what replaces it is somehow harder to hear, because it requires no exotic equipment, no high-tech cover-up. It only required indifference. It only required a man who could go to a radio interview the day after, who could pose for photos for an album release, who could keep posting to fans while a child rotted 10 feet from his kitchen. That is not a horror movie. That is a man with a calendar. This is the theory I personally cannot let go of, because emotionally it just feels impossible that a 20-year-old worked alone. The dismemberment, the disposal, the driving, the lying to friends, the cadaver bag delivered by a postal worker who had no idea what they were dropping off. Could one person really pull every thread of this and not have a single accomplice? The prosecution says yes. The indictment says yes. Not a single co-defendant has been named. Not Neil Langston, the friend who was reportedly arrested for failing to appear before the grand jury, has been charged in connection with the killing itself. Not the manager. Not the streaming buddies. Not the rotating cast of people the file describes as being in and around that Hollywood Hills house in the months after April 23rd. The district attorney has gone on record saying simply that the investigation is ongoing, that anyone with information should come forward, and that if more charges arrive, the public will hear about it. That is the polite legal version. Here is the version your gut is shouting at you. We have video. TMZ surfaced footage from a July 4th livestream. A livestream where the defendant is hanging out with friends, casually like a man whose life is not unraveling, apologizing for a smell in the bathroom and joking that he had just used it. By the prosecution's own timeline, the body had been in his garage and then his Tesla for over 2 months at that point. 2 months. And his friends sitting feet away did not know, or they did know, or they chose not to know, and there is daylight between all three of those possibilities that the file does not yet fill in. Watch that live stream again with this knowledge, and the hairs on your arm stand up. He laughs. He jokes. He looks into the camera. He apologizes for the smell. He hands the phone to a friend. The internet thought it was a normal stream. The internet was, in real time, watching a man stand in the same square footage as a corpse and tell jokes. Then layer on the part that breaks the heart of anyone with a moral compass. According to the brief, when Celeste was just 13, law enforcement had already once investigated this so-called relationship. He was told she was a child. He continued. He drove to her town. He paid a junior high schooler $1,000 to deliver a cell phone he had bought, just so this child could keep talking to him after her parents had taken her phone away. He took her to Las Vegas. He took her to London. He took her to Texas to meet his family. Read that again. To meet his family. Which means somebody, somewhere in a dining room, at a kitchen counter, sat across from a teenage girl introduced as his girlfriend, his student, his friend, his anything, and either did not ask questions or asked them, and accepted the answers. And then there is London. Because under UK law, a minor cannot just travel internationally with an adult who is not their parent. There are visa applications. There are consent forms. There are documents that name the adult traveling with the child, sometimes 2 adults, listed in writing on the application. Private investigator Steve Fisher pointed this out publicly. Somebody on paper in a government office processed those forms. Somebody signed off. Somebody decided this was fine. He could not have done all of this alone in the sense that nobody else laid eyes on her. Whether anyone else laid hands on what happened that April night is a different question, and right now the answer, legally, is no. Morally, the silence around him is its own kind of fingerprint. And do not, let me catch any of you in the comments saying she looked older. She was 11 when this started. She was 13 when the police were already calling. She was 14 when she died. Old enough to text a man plan B is not old enough to consent. It never was. It never will be. Move on with me. I have to address this because it is the ugliest part of the discourse, and frankly, the part that says the most about us as an audience. Somewhere on Reddit, somewhere in a small town in inland California, a rumor took root that Celeste's family had been paid off, that her parents had cashed checks to look the other way, that there were envelopes of money exchanging hands at gas stations and bus stops. Through their attorney, the family has flatly denied it. Her father stated on the record that he never had contact with the defendant and never received money from him or his people. There is no document in the brief, no wire transfer in the discovery, no whisper from the DA that suggests otherwise. And if there were, do you understand what that would do to the prosecution's case? It would supercharge it. A payoff to a family of a minor victim would be Exhibit A in proving intent to silence, intent to conceal consciousness of guilt. Prosecutors would build a billboard around it. They have not, because it does not exist. What does exist, and what is much harder for the internet to sit with, is a power imbalance that does not need money to be devastating. A glamorous, wealthy, 20-something pop star with endorsements and global tours and a household name. A working-class family in a hot, dusty stretch of inland California, with a daughter who at 11 years old had already become his target. Retired Detective Matt Irvine, who I have heard speak about this case more than once, put it about as plainly as anyone has. A predator does not need to bribe a family. A predator ingratiates. A predator becomes the exciting friend, the cool older guy, the one who buys gifts and books trips and texts late at night. And when the family resists, when they take away her phone, the predator drives 70 miles and hands $1,000 to another child to get around them. That is not a family that was bought. That is a family that was hunted. And every comment section, every smug post, every keyboard detective who has decided this mother and father are somehow complicit, is doing the predator's last act of work for him, by turning the spotlight away from the only person who deserves it. Stop. Just stop. Their daughter is gone. They did not lose her on April 23rd. They have been losing her by inches since she was 11. They have been answering doors to police officers. They have been confiscating phones. They have been driving the back roads looking for a girl who kept running back to the man who was killing her in slow motion long before he ever picked up a knife. Let them grieve without your conspiracy theories on top of their casket. Okay, this is the part. This is the thing nobody else has put in front of you yet, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Here is the official timeline from the prosecution, laid out in the brief, exactly as they tell it. Around 10:10 at night, on April the 22nd going into the 23rd, Celeste arrives at the defendant's Hollywood Hills home in an Uber. By approximately 10:30, the defendant is sending texts to her phone, asking where she is. By 11:30, the defendant is in his Tesla, driving north on the 101 freeway, headed to a remote stretch of road off State Route 154 in Santa Barbara County, an isolated patch of land where, months and months later, her U.S. passport card would be discovered by a Caltrans worker doing routine roadside maintenance. The DA's reading of that timeline is simple. He killed her almost immediately, staged a "Where are you" text as a fake alibi, and then drove out to scout a dump site within the same hour. Now read it again, but this time, read it like an investigator. 20 minutes. That is the entire window between her stepping out of an Uber alive and the first alibi text going out. In 20 minutes, the prosecution is asking us to believe that an argument escalated, that 2 penetrating stab wounds to the torso were inflicted, that a 14-year-old's last breath was witnessed, and that the killer then composed himself, cleaned up enough to operate a phone, and crafted what they call a calculated and planned alibi message. Is it possible? Sure, anything is possible. A panicked 20-year-old is capable of typing in a panic. Is it clean? Not even a little bit. And here is where private investigator Steve Fisher, the one working from the property where the defendant had been staying, posted a theory that I think the algorithm has buried, and I want to surface it for you, because it is genuinely the most interesting alternative reading of this evidence I have seen all year. What if the "Where are you" text is not staged? What if it is real? What if Celeste arrived? They argued. She walked out. She was a teenager. She had run away before. The file confirms she had a history of leaving when she was upset. And what if those messages he sent at 10:30 are the genuine, panicked, controlling texts of a man who could not find the child he had been grooming for 3 years? What if he then went looking for her? What if he found her? And what if the killing did not happen at the Hollywood Hills house at all, but somewhere along the route he drove that very night? The same route in Santa Barbara County where her passport card would later be found in a ditch 9 months later. Because here is the cleanup problem nobody is talking about. The pool, the chainsaws, the body bag, the laundry bags. By the prosecution's own dates, those items had not even been ordered yet on April the 23rd. The shovel did not arrive from Postmates until April the 24th. The chainsaws did not show up until May the 1st. The pool and the cadaver bag, May the 3rd. Which means, if the killing happened inside that garage on April the 23rd, where exactly did the body sit for 10 to 12 days while he waited for Amazon to deliver his disposal kit? And why does the LAPD's own search of the house show no evidence of a cleanup operation? No luminol traces of a serious chemical wash. No biorecovery team being called in by investigators. No bulk purchases of cleaning supplies in his card history. Steve Fisher pointed out, on my colleague's show, that for the kind of cleanup a stabbing in a residential garage would require, you would expect to see the markers, the tech suits, the bio teams pulling apart drywall and pulling up flooring and tearing into HVAC vents. He did not see them. The brief does not allege them. There are no luminal positive zones. There are no swabs of subfloor blood. There are no expert witnesses listed for crime scene reconstruction inside that garage. And this is where I am going to say something carefully, because legally, the defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty, and because I personally believe the DA has the right person. But the official story has a 20-minute hole in it, and that hole is big enough that an entire defense team is going to drive a truck through it at trial. The killing may not have happened where they say. The night may not have unfolded in the order they have written. And the truth, whatever it actually is, may be uglier, slower, more deliberate, and more premeditated than even the indictment admits. Picture it. He texts her, panicked. He drives. He finds her at the side of a road somewhere along the 101. He convinces her to get in the car. They argue again. They drive north. And somewhere on a stretch of Santa Barbara Highway, in the DAC, with no cameras and no witnesses, the project finally goes live. He drives home before dawn. He goes to a radio interview the next morning for his album release. He orders a shovel from Home Depot. He waits. And 10 days later, when Amazon finally finishes delivering his disposal kit, he goes back, retrieves what he left, and finishes what he started in a garage that, by then, is fully equipped. Read the brief again with that timeline in your head. Watch the dates of the purchases. Watch the dates of the 3 separate trips to Santa Barbara. Watch the gap. It fits. It might be wrong. The DA's version might still be the right one. But it fits, and the fact that it fits is exactly why this case is going to be uglier at trial than anyone expects. Naturally, his attorneys have entered a plea of not guilty. They have denied the allegations, they have denied that he caused her death, and they will, in some form, suggest reasonable doubt at trial. They will probably point at Neil. They will probably point at the manager. They will probably point at the property owner, at the streaming buddies, at the rotating cast of people moving through that house. Could that doubt land? Honestly, in isolation, on any single piece of evidence, maybe. There is no surveillance footage from inside the home capturing the killing. There is no eyewitness who watched a blade enter a child. Prosecutors have not yet explained, publicly, how they know with such specificity that he watched her bleed out, and that is the kind of detail a sharp defense attorney will pick at all day. Cross-examination is going to be a slow knife on that single sentence. But here is why a frame-up defense is going to collapse the second the jury sees the receipts. It is not one thing. It is everything, stacked. A shovel ordered the morning after she died. 2 chainsaws delivered 8 days later. A cadaver bag, laundry bags, and an inflatable pool ordered 3 days after that. A burn cage purchased 2 months later under a fake name, Victoria Mendez. 3 separate trips out to the exact stretch of Santa Barbara Road where her ID would eventually surface. A girl whose cell phone activity simply stops, forever, on April the 23rd. Text messages a day earlier in which she threatened to expose him and end his career, on the eve of his debut album release. An album worth millions. Endorsements worth millions more. A teenager, dead. A career, conveniently preserved for another 4 months of touring and smiling into cameras. You can argue any one of those facts. You cannot argue all of them at once. And that is before the jury hears about the photographs the DA has chosen not to display, the child sexual abuse material that, by the prosecution's own filing, documents this relationship at 13 and 14. And that is before they hear, in her own digital handwriting, the sentence the brief quotes, "All we do is have sex and just hang out. I want more than that for myself." That is a 14-year-old, written into the legal record forever, asking for more than what a grown man was giving her. There is no jury on planet Earth that hears that sentence and walks out of a deliberation room feeling charitable toward the defendant. Frame-up defenses work when there is a missing motive, a missing means, or a missing opportunity. He has all 3 written in his own purchase history. The only real question the defense can credibly raise is the one I just walked you through. Was the killing where they say it was, in the way they say it was, in the timeline they say it was? And even if the answer to that question is no, the answer to the bigger question, did he do this, is still going to come back yes. The defense might trim 10 years off a sentence. They are not getting their client out of that building. I want to slow down for one more minute before we close, because there is one piece of evidence in this brief that almost no creator has spent the time it deserves on, and it is, in my opinion, the single most damning artifact in the entire file. Her phone. Not what was on it. What stopped being on it. According to the prosecution, All cellular activity from Celeste's phone ceases on April the 23rd. Forever. Not a single ping. Not a single tower handshake. Not a single passive background refresh. A 14-year-old in 2025 does not voluntarily walk away from her phone. She does not turn it off and leave it in a drawer. She does not let it die for 9 months. The only way that signal goes dark and stays dark is if someone takes it, removes the battery, drives it somewhere it cannot speak from, and either destroys it or buries it. And here is the part that gives me chills. The defendant, by the prosecution's own data, drives north on the 101 that same night into the same Santa Barbara County dead zone where, months later, her passport card surfaces. 2 pieces of her, the card and the phone, both pointing to the same stretch of dirt. Forensic detective Matt Irvine, speaking on this exact case, made the point that geolocation data, especially when corroborated by license plate readers, by Tesla telemetry, by flock cameras at intersections, is, in his words, very, very hard for any defense attorney to argue against. Modern phones leak even when they are off. The Find My iPhone protocol still negotiates with nearby Bluetooth devices for hours after a power down. The Tesla itself logs every drive, every stop, every door open, every charge port on latch, in a server-side record the defendant does not even own. He could not have known how loudly every machine in his life was about to testify against him. He was a young man who grew up famous, who grew up believing he could outrun anything with a smile and a brand deal, and he walked into a fight against the entire surveillance infrastructure of the modern world, and he lost it before he ever picked up a knife. Remember that when the defense gets up at trial and tries to wave away the geolocation data, they are not just fighting the LAPD. They are fighting Apple, Tesla, Amazon, Postmates, Home Depot, Verizon, and the cold and patient memory of every server in California. That is not a fight a frame-up defense wins. That is a fight that ends in a sentencing hearing. I want to end where I started, with the 20-minute window, because I have been sitting with it for days now, and the more I sit with it, the more I think it tells us something nobody is saying. Look at the choreography again. He is told by police that she is 13. He continues. Her parents take her phone. He buys her another one and pays a middle schooler to deliver it. She runs away to him. He flies her overseas. He brings her around his family. He posts. He performs. He releases an album. And on the eve of the album release, the only person on earth who can detonate his entire empire with one phone call to TMZ is a 14-year-old who has just told him, in writing, that she is done being his secret. 24 hours later, she is in an Uber on her way to his house. 20 minutes after she steps out of that car, she is, by any reasonable read of this evidence, dead or about to be. 10 days later, a chainsaw is on his doorstep. 12 days later, a pool, a body bag, and a stack of heavy-duty laundry sacks. 3 months later, a burn cage under a woman's name. And in between 3 road trips to a piece of empty California highway where eventually the last identifiable scrap of her, a passport card, falls out of the story like a single feather. Tell me that is impulsive. Tell me that is a panic. Tell me that is anything other than a plan that was sitting in the back of someone's mind, gathering dust, waiting for the night she finally pushed too hard. The unique angle this case deserves, the one no headline has fully said out loud, is this: Celeste Rivas Hernandez was not killed in a moment. She was killed in a project. A project he had been quietly drafting for the years he spent grooming her, the months he spent calibrating his public image, the weeks he spent timing receipts on Amazon. The 20-minute window is not the start of the murder. It is the moment the project finally went live. And every theory we have been arguing about, pregnancy, freezing, accomplices, family payoffs, the body, the fingers, the tattoo, they are all small windows into a much larger machine that was running long before April the 23rd and may not, even now, be fully shut down. Because here is the thought I cannot stop circling. If he was capable of this much premeditation for one girl, was she the first one? Was she the only one? The grand jury investigation is technically still open. The DA has said on the record that anyone with information should come forward. Read that sentence the way a former prosecutor would read it, not the way a press release reads it. That sentence is fishing. That sentence is a net. That sentence is the DA telling anyone in his orbit, on any old tour, in any old hotel, who saw anything, that the door is still open. And given everything we have already learned about how he operated, the fake names on Amazon, the burn cage, the patience, the calm, do not be surprised if, in the coming weeks, this case grows a second chapter the public has not been prepared for. That preliminary hearing at the end of the month is going to be the first time we see the prosecution lay out the real spine of this case in open court. Not all of it. Just enough. Just enough to establish probable cause. Just enough to bind him over for trial. Just enough to give the press a few quotes and the family a few hours of relief. Watch whether Neil Langston is finally asked the questions he ducked the grand jury about. Watch whether any new name walks into that courtroom that we have not heard yet. Because the answer to that one question will tell you whether the DA is selling you the easy version of this story, or the true one. Until then, do not light the family on fire over a Reddit rumor. Do not crown a rumor a fact. Do not let yourself become part of the same crowd that for 3 years looked at a 14-year-old child standing next to a grown man and decided, by silence, that it was somehow normal. We owe her better than that. We owe her parents better than that. And we owe ourselves better than another viral case where the truth gets buried under our own noise. The preliminary hearing is coming. The fingers are still missing. The road off State Route 154 is still out there, dusty and quiet and indifferent. The kind of road you could drive past 100 times in your life and never look twice at. Keep your eyes on it. Keep your heart on her. And whatever the jury eventually decides, remember the 20-minute window, because it is the smallest, sharpest, most honest hole in this entire case. And it is the closest thing we have, right now, to her telling us, from wherever she is, that the official story is not quite the whole story. And one more thing before I let you go, because I have been thinking about this all week, and I have to say it out loud. The album. Read this part of the timeline back, slowly. His debut studio album was scheduled to drop on April the 25th, 2025. Celeste, by The Brief, dies on April the 23rd. 2 days. 48 hours. The Brief tells us that the night before, on April the 22nd, they had a long, ugly text argument, that she was jealous, that she had threatened to end his career, that she had told him she was going to disclose damaging information about their relationship. The album drops in 48 hours. He has product endorsements layered on top of it. He has a tour booked behind it. He has, in plain financial terms, the most valuable 48 hours of his life sitting right in front of him. And the only person standing between him and that windfall is a 14-year-old girl with a working phone and a grievance. I do not think the prosecution chose those words by accident when they used the phrase financial gain in the special circumstances allegation. They are telling you, in the calm legalese of a court filing, that this child was killed on a deadline, that her last 24 hours were governed by a release calendar, that somewhere in the back of a 20-year-old singer's mind, an album launch and a homicide were 2 checkboxes on the same week's task list. Sit with that. Sit with how cold that is. Sit with how that one detail, the proximity of those 2 dates, reframes every Amazon receipt that follows. He was not panicking. He was scheduling. He had a window, and inside that window he had a problem, and he treated that problem the way he treated everything else in his career, as a logistics challenge with a deadline. That is the version of David Anthony Burke that is going to walk into a courtroom next month. Not the panicked kid. Not the boyfriend who lost it. The brand manager. The launch coordinator. The man who looked at a calendar with an album on Friday and a witness on Wednesday and decided which one of them was going to survive the week. Stay close. Drop your theory in the comments below. Was the killing in the garage or out on the road? Was Neil involved or just a coward? Do you think more charges are coming? Tell me which detail wrecked you the most. Was it the fingers? Was it the pool? Was it the burn cage? Was it that sentence in her own handwriting? Share this with one person who has been getting only the headlines, because she deserves better than headlines. Subscribe if you have not already, because the moment that preliminary hearing opens, I'm going to be right here, line by line, page by page, hour by hour, until Celeste finally gets the version of the truth she was never allowed to tell while she was alive. She was a child. She was loved. She was hunted. She was killed. And the people in this comment section, watching to the end, are the closest thing she has to a jury before the real one ever sits down. Show up for her. I will see you at the hearing. One more thing. If you have a tip, anything at all that touches this case, please call the LAPD homicide line tonight. Do not sit on it. Do not post it for clout. Do not let it die in a group chat. Call. Tonight. For her own sakes.